Okay, well, Dennis, thanks for your very kind words, and thanks to all of you for coming, and of course, thanks to all the staff, the owners of the place, for having us in this wonderful place. I've been working all of my life, all my adult life, in the South Central Andes, in northern Chile, the Atacama Desert, and in Tiwanaku, just south of Lake Titicaca. My concern has not been ayahuasca. I've always been working with Anadenanthera and related snuffs and smoke preparations in Antiquity. The burials we excavate in San Pedro de Atacama, they basically, okay. So these graves that we've been digging in San Pedro de Atacama, they date roughly from 300 to 700 AD. Preservation in the desert is extremely excellent, so we have been able to do all kinds of analysis. So in the pursuit of my Anadenanthera research, I kept coming up with, in the iconography of some cultures like the Moche, which we will see later, and in early Spanish chronicles, 1550, 1560, accounts of the addition of Anadenanthera seeds that are rich in bufotenin to beer making, to chicha, which is generally either made out of base of corn or prosopis, which is normally called algarrobo, or moche, what in the US they call California pepper, but they are all used as a base for making different beers. So that I kept bumping into this, I thought, could this pre-Columbian beers have anything to do with the origins of ayahuasca? Not that as predecessors of ayahuasca, because when you look at the history of ayahuasca, well, I'll run you through it. But ayahuasca is most likely, the recipe that we have today is probably not much older than 300 years perhaps, which seems like a lot, but when you come from an archaeology that we're doing that things are 1,500 years, 2,000 years, 300 years is a baby in a way, but it is not so. It's just the recipe, this particular recipe of ayahuasca, of Banisteriopsis and chacruna, or Banisteriopsis and Tetrapterys, that is more recent. So first I'm going to take you through like a history. My paper is much longer, but due to time restrictions, I have concentrated on ayahuasca and yagé, otherwise we'll be here all afternoon. And so I abridged the paper to be able to do it in 45 minutes or so. Okay, so first I'm going to take you through a history of ayahuasca backwards as far as we can take it. Then after we end up with that, I am going to start searching the iconography of two pre-Columbian cultures where the probability of these beers is evident, the Moche and the Wari people. This is Central Andean cultures. Then, after we take care of that, I wanted then to see what the possibility that these beers would actually have beta-carbolines and would actually render active orally the seeds of Anadenanthera. Okay, so, well, let's start. Okay, so 50 years ago, in this very same conference, where there were only the one paper of Claudio Naranjo that Eduardo mentioned, there was in an article analyzing snuffs from the Piaroa people of the Orinoco Basin, Homestead and Lindgren made the following statement. That is what started the idea of MAO inhibitors and the tryptamines having a synergy with each other. So Homestead and Lindgren state the following. Let me grab it in my... Getting all wired. Yeah, okay, sorry. And the synergy of these two. So they stress this, the occurrence of both tryptamines and beta-carbolines in the South American snuffs is pharmacologically interesting. The beta-carbolines are monoamine oxidase inhibitors and could potentiate the action of the simple indoles. The combination of beta-carbolines and tryptamine would thus be advantageous. So 50 years ago, this was, wow, quite a discovery. And it was in the volume that the proceedings of the conference, this is the second one. In the slide is, well, ayahuasca with Anadenanthera in the background, growing in a private garden. Okay. Then, if you were to consider ayahuasca, I think that it is a mistake not to consider it within the larger framework of analogous beverages throughout the South American continent. So among these, well, ayahuasca and yagé, that was explained by Eduardo before, and then you have jurema with Mimosa hostilis, still with the mystery of the probability of beta carbolines in it or not. It looks like it, that there will be, so that you would only need one plant to make this ayahuasca analog. The root bark of Mimosa hostilis is high in DMT, about 2%. Okay, then further south, among the Wichí of the Chaco, generally by the border of today's Paraguay, Bolivia, Argentina, that little corner of northwest Argentina, lived the Wichí in this territory that until now has been left alone. Now the problem is they found natural gas, and these semi-nomadic people have been displaced all over the place. So there the Wichí they make a beer out of algarrobo, prosopis, with the seeds and the pods, and then during the process of fermentation, they add a mash of Anadenanthera seeds into this, that they call, when they talk Spanish to you, vino de Seville wine. It's not really a wine, it'd be more like a beer, in a way. And then a similar preparation is made in the Central Andes by the Quechua people, by the so-called Inca, in which they take either germinated corn chicha to make a lot of enzymes and really a lot of alcohol can be produced. But realize this is 4 or 5% alcohol, it's not that much. And then they add the seeds of Anadenanthera to this. Then other similar potion is yaraque by the Guajibo of Colombia, where they make a beer out of cassava, out of yuca, and then they add also, instead of adding the seeds there, they add the same powder that they snuff. So it's a finely ground powder is put into the beer also during the fermentation process, creating what I think, and we'll expand on this at the end, what are ayahuasca analogs. Okay. And then the mystery, the biggest mystery so far, Tetrapterys methystica. Schultes collected and described his experiences with this plant back in 1942. But he fell ill with beriberi, right? I think. And he, on his return to Colombia from Brazil, his canoe overturned with all the materials he had collected. Evidently, by his description, really good evidence with flowers and all of that. But since then, no one that I know, although Glenn was suggesting to contact a Brazilian anthropologist that might have some info on it. But as far as we go, this is one of the bigger mysteries, followed by Guello, when Columbus arrives in the Greater Antilles, in what is today, roughly he arrives in the border between Haiti and Dominican Republic. He leaves a friar there, Ramon Panet, a monk of the Order of St. Jerome. And he lives in there, in a heroic thing, for 4 years. Panet stays alone, along with no other Europeans, I mean, in the Dominican Republic for 4 years. Columbus then picks him up in the return of his second trip. And there, he describes this potion that the Taino call Guello. But he's not specific about ingredients. But it's another promising area to investigate. So I think that many of you younger scholars should look at these things. They are promising. Guello was so potent that Panet describes that if you mix it with the hair of the dead, he wanted to, the people of the family of this dead man wanted to investigate whether the shaman was guilty of the death. So they want to make the dead guy talk. So they clip his hairs, some of his hairs, some of his nails, they mix it with Guello and feed the dead guy. This is in the presence of Panet. And then the dead guy talks and exonerates the shaman from the death. So it is an interesting potion that should be further investigated for obvious reasons. But no, you know, it's, yeah. So then if you see the distribution of these talks, of these different substances throughout, you have like a total surrounding of ayahuasca territory by these potions. You have jurema over there, vino de Seville here, chicha with vilca here, and then you have yaraque on top, Tetrapterys methystica, and then something that I think, together with the beers, is important for the rest of this talk, is how from the very beginning, Spruce sees this Wahibo man that is, as he prepares his snuff, he keeps chewing caapi for a couple of hours, and then he snuffs, and then he tells, I'll show you the quote of Spruce in a minute. So the plants, so they chew caapi and they snuff a couple of hours later. So effectively, it's the body that's making the ayahuasca. When you eat all of this, there's a synergy between the two, and it goes. But we'll return to that too. Okay. So the distribution of the plants, basically, they are DMT and its relatives are all around, and it is the preferred mode, really. If you come to think of it, the preferred mode of modifying states of consciousness in the South American continent is by the activation of the different psychoactive tryptamines. The area, so you have Virola up there with 5-MeO, Anadenanthera peregrina with dimethyltryptamine, acolubrina, which the main alkaloid is bufotenine, and then DMT. The big exception to this is the area of San Pedro cactus in the coast and the adjacent Andes of northern Peru. The spread of San Pedro to the south, it seems like the knowledge of San Pedro doesn't get as far as Cusco until the 16th century. Previously, it's basically an affair of this area. Okay. So the plant ingredients, I'm not going to explain much about ayahuasca. All of you know what it is, and Eduardo has well explained it before, but I'll show you the plant ingredient, the plants. Well, the base drink is Banisteriopsis cadapi, the base of the drink, and that base is to which plants are added to modify the effect, so that it makes the DMT orally active. So this is ayahuasca, is flower, is fruit, the samara, and then the plants that are most commonly used is, well, Psychotria viridis is the one more widespread today when we know it as chacruna. But then in Colombia and Ecuador, where chacruna does not grow, Diplopteris cabrerana is the plant used that is it's sort of like a relative of Banisteriopsis, but in this case, the leaves that contain the DMT. Okay. Then many others, like it was mentioned before, are added, like tobacco, Brugmansia, Brunfelsia, depending on the circumstances. But these are just 3 out of at least 100 plants that are used in the ayahuasca complex. Okay. Now, as far as how far can we take it with the available information? Well, there are, of course, myths that relate the creation of ayahuasca. An interesting one is this myth related by Gerardo Raikal-Dolmatov in his book Beyond the Milky Way, and that's a drawing taken from that book. He takes this story about this very pregnant woman was in a maloca, in a collective house, and it was a feast, and it was a lot of noise and drinking and so forth, but she then steps out because she can't take this stuff so much. So she goes wandering in the forest, and then out in the forest, she gives birth to this luminous child. It's a wonderful story, it's much longer, to this luminous child, and then she comes back to the Maloca carrying this baby that is just pure light, and when she gets in there, she screams, "Who's the father of this child?" And all the men scream, "I'm the father of the child, I'm the father of the child," and they tore the kid apart. And so they plant the child, and every Tucano community has its own Banisteriopsis vine. It's a really nice story. But then, as far as audience in archaeology, it's really none. Recently, an article was published from this team of investigators in Chile that started analyzing the hair of mummy bundles. Really not mummies they are not manipulated bodies. They are bodies dehydrated by the effect of the desert. They were really, it's a bad article. It's gotten a lot of press because they said, "Oh, we found harmaline in the hair of these mummies." Well, they analyzed 12. They found harmaline in the hair of 2 mummies, a child and a woman, and then they tried to find DMT in the hair, and of course they were not successful, but because by all accounts, DMT does not go to the hair follicle, so it won't be in the hair. So they did not succeed, and they do not contemplate the possibility that DMT is not present in the hair because it doesn't go to the hair. They just make a big argument about the absence of it and the use of harmaline as a thing. And then they propose that they were bringing ayahuasca from the jungle into the Valle de Azapa, which is very northern Chile, almost to the border with Peru, on the border with Peru, really. And then they proposed, but now imagine yourselves, this is the driest desert in the world. So here you're going to what? Bring ayahuasca from hundreds of miles away, and in what kind of amounts you would have to bring to supply a community with ayahuasca. You would have to have llama caravans coming from the jungle to bring Banisteriopsis here. And so there is a faulty argument altogether, and they don't try and explain the presence of harmaline by other means. Like basically, as you know, in shamanic practices in South America, tobacco smoke is blown into the head of people kind of with a lot of frequency. But then these mummy bundles were in the museum storage rooms for decades with people smoking around them. So that the presence of harmaline in the hair of these mummies is most likely tobacco and combined with bad analytical techniques, because then they went and they tested a relative of one of the friends, that a woman that was is a hairdresser, and her daughter, 12-year-old at the time, and they also found harmaline in the hair of these two women. So it's a mess. So the archaeology of this is shot at this moment. There is no knowledge of it. Then the earliest mentions of ayahuasca, okay, in historical documents, the earliest one, and they are almost contemporary. I'll show you the quotes in a minute. It's Pablo Maroni and José Chantrey Herrera that describe, Herrera is a very nice description. They describe the use of ayahuasca in the late 1700s, basically. I'm sorry, in the late 1600s, early 1700s, this happens. I'll show you the quotes, both of them. Then another big description of these early ones is the one of Juan Manin. Then Manuel Villavicencio was merging before, around 1850. He is the first one that I know of that tries ayahuasca and publishes about his experience. He was an Ecuadorian geographer that wrote a book, the geography of the Republic of Ecuador. And then Alfred Wallace, traveling basically at the same time as Spruce, also describes the thing. So it's in 1851, the explosion of descriptions occur. And so you have the descriptions of Wallace, of Villavicencio, of Simpson, and Spruce all coming out really within months of each other. So it's kind of like it usually happens, that this takes place like that. So let me show you a couple of these quotes so that you see what. This is the quote of Chantrey Herrera. See, the difficulty with his work is that he compiles a history of Jesuits in South America from 1637 to 1767. But whatever he describes inside is not dated. So at one point in 130 years, a Jesuit priest in the Amazon wrote this down. There are no credits given. So at some point there, this was witnessed. Not by Chantrey himself. The date of 1767, because that is the year that the Jesuits get expelled from America and from the world, really. It's a conflict with the Vatican, internal politics about theological interpretations, and the Jesuits get sort of locked out of everywhere they were missionizing. They come back like 100 and some years later in 1862. So there he describes this effect, but what is most important in this probably the first description, already they are talking about additions to the basic brew. What he says that they add bitter herbs. Also to be noticed that it is common today in Amazonia that at this time they are already drinking the brew in 2 small cups rather than 1. And then the same for Maroni. It's the same area, the Marañón River. The Marañón River does a loop I'll show you in the map. When it comes, suppose this is the Andes and you're looking towards the Pacific. So the Marañón goes sort of south-north, but then it takes a loop and comes down, and it becomes one of the tributaries of the upper Amazon. Okay. So it is a point of contact with the jungle. Then the spruce. He is the first one to correctly identify botanically the plant. So he publishes this in Ocean Highways, a journal. It's available online if you wanted to see the whole complete description. And so there he identifies it as Banisterium caapi spruce. And this he sees in November of 1853. He had already witnessed ayahuasca 2 years earlier, in 1851. So this is the samples that are here at Kew in the herbarium. You can see them online in the Kew herbarium specimen. And then, ayahuasca flowers, which is very beautiful. Ayahuasca, when you see it in a private garden out of its habitat, in Miami, for example, where this photo is taken, when the temperature goes down, like what it goes down to our coldest temperatures in the winter, maybe Fahrenheit 52, 55 degrees, so not very cold for your standards. But then immediately the whole plant gets full of flowers. You go see like 3 days later after the first cold spell, and you can see them already coming, and then they get completely covered with those beautiful flowers, pink and white at their earlier stages. And then it has the seed, the samara, the flying structure. Okay. Then this is Villavicencio's description, which is the earliest account of anybody taking this, in which he's curious in how he said, I, for myself, can say that when I have taken ayahuasca, I felt dizzy. After an aerial tour, I remember perceiving most delicious perspective. It's nice how he says delicious perspective, in some kind of synesthesia in there. Yeah, delicious perspective. Great cities, elevated towers, and beautiful parks, and other extremely beautiful objects. Then I imagined being abandoned in a forest, attacked by wild animals, trying to defend myself. The effects of these drinks are not inferior to the components of opium used by the people of the Far East to sail out to a sea of pleasant illusions. So this is, isn't that a nice, for this time, this guy was avant-garde, you know, in these things, yeah. It's interesting to see this. And I also like the way he uses the word imagine in the old sense of the word. Because for us today, imagine is some kind of fantasy, some kind of illusion. But imagine in the real context of the word is the process of making images. I imagine, I make something into our image. It's not I create some illusion, some fantasy. So I thought that is a very nice use of the word, which is, I guess, how it should be used. Then it becomes a real powerful statement when I imagine it, I created the images out of some concept or idea. You know. So it's okay. Now this is the sequence of discoveries of admixtures to spruce. Mentions caapi pinima, that Schultes thinks that it might be Tetrapterys methystica, but there's no documentation about it. And then Simpson in his travels also mentions additives, and those are interesting. I'll show them to you in a minute. Theodore Koch-Grunberg distinguished 2 species of caapi. Joaquin Rocha, a traveler in the Colombian Amazon, he publishes this book in 1905, Memorandum de Viaje, in which he witnesses the preparation of yagé, adding Diplopteris. Then Reinberg also confirms the addition of Diplopteris in 1921. Then William Burroughs, in his really fantastic book, The Yagé Letters, is the first one to really value. I'll show you the quote of Burroughs, which has been overlooked. In 1956, in Pucallpa, he witnesses this addition of, and he identifies as a rubiacea. And then Homer Pinkley, a student of Schultes, makes the real accurate description of Psychotria as an addition to ayahuasca. A fact of trivia, I was trying to look at Homer Pinkley, and I kept coming up about this lace maker in Connecticut. And yeah, the guy has abandoned ethnobotany and is an expert traditional lace maker. It's kind of, isn't it? It's kind of, wow, I admire the guy for that, able to change his profession to something completely out of the way, you know, lace making, which is a difficult task. If you've ever seen traditional lace making, how it goes, it's that. So the additive accounts, for example, of, just to not bother you with many, the one of Simpson in his travels in the wilds of Ecuador, he is the first to be so precise. So he says that piojes drink ayahuasca mixed with yagé, Tetrapterys, samaruja leaf, psychotria, and guanto wood. The early descriptions of guanto, they call it datura arborea, tree datura, which is now today brugmansia. And then this is a potent brew. It usually will result in a broil between at least the partakers of the beverage. Okay. Then the Pinkley sees the addition among the Kofan, not only of psychotria, but the addition of Tetrapterys to the same brew, making probably a real interesting potion. Then Burroughs, in a manuscript that he never published, that he would call it in his notes the Yagé article. He says how he met this guy in Pucallpa and that he showed him how to make Yagé. And then he says the effect of the leaves of another plant tentatively identified as a species of Rubiaceae, which is correct. The effect of Yagé prepared, and then he notices, he makes this statement which is important, the effect of Yagé prepared in this manner is qualitatively different from cold water infusion of Yagé alone or Yagé cooked alone. The other leaf is essential to realize the full effect of the drug. So this is Burroughs. He was a perceptive man, whatever people think, oh, he was a junkie, whatever, but he was a great writer, he enjoyed his heroin, and he produced great novels out of it. So I think that, hey, that's what he liked. No, we should not criticize. But now, if you go looking at ayahuasca, previous to the description of Chantre, Herrera, and Maroni, it goes silent. There is no more evidence before, say, to give you a round number, before 1750. That's it. Then you say, well, why is this? Because for the other visionary substances, the accounts are right on. The minute the Spaniards walk into all these places, they see and they note it. So that for Anadenanthera, we have found archaeological remains in northwest Argentina, radiocarbon dated with several dates, so that it is about 4,000 years old in rock shelters at high altitude, like the 20, I think Inca Cueva is about 2,600 meters in altitude. Then Banisteriopsis, well, for now we have to stay there. This might change, like every time. Then Brugmansia, the earliest representations of Brugmansia are in the Chavín sculpture of the Andes of northern Peru, as early as 900 to 700 BC. Then later, among the Muisca in Colombia, Raicaldor Molotov relates, but that's much later, that's in the 15th century. Then tobacco is probably older, but so far the actual physical archaeobotany of it it's 1200 BC in Chiripa, in what is today Bolivia, and in Niño Corín, on the northeastern side of Lake Titicaca. There is Nicotiana, 300 to 500 AD, with good radiocarbon dates on that. Then coca, it's at least 2000 BC. It has been found, not only the leaves, because you say, well, there could be leaves there, but that does not prove human beings are using it. Maybe the bush just grew there, is the argument that you could say. But these findings in Asia and in culebras are together with the alkaline substances used to chew coca, proving, I guess without the shadow of a doubt, that human beings were chewing coca as early as 4,000 years ago. And then the cactus Trichocereus, it's been found also about the same age. So about 4,000 years ago, all of these psychedelics came into being. You should think that this is also a period, let's say between 2000 and 1500, where people begin to abandon nomadic life and begin to settle down. Agriculture, ceramics are coming into weaving, are coming into being, and then these plants come into work. It's in a way as if they would help in adapting to the new conditions of life. They were, continuing to adapt. So Spruce's quote is this, when Spruce observed this guy in 1852. This is an exhibition in the economic botany area at Kew. I saw it 2 years ago, so it should be there. The Guajibo, this is the Colombian grasslands people, had a bit of caapi hung from his neck, along with the snuff box. And as he ground his ñopo, he every now and then tore off a strip of caapi with his teeth and chewed it with evident satisfaction. Then he says, with a chew of caapi and a pinch of ñopo, said he in his broken Spanish, one feels so good. No hunger, no thirst, no tired. So here we get the first clue about this synergy, that the native people are aware, really well aware of the synergy between the two plants. Then, so if we're going to look at, so in the next few sections here, I wanted to show you the chewing of caapi and the drinking of Anadenanthera seeds as part of beer making. So Anadenanthera is basically two species that get used by native people. Colubrina, which is what you see here, in its preferred habitat, open spaces, no forest crowding it or anything. It doesn't go to the rainforest. Some the Yanomamo and others planted, but it is a garden, not the natural habitat of the plant. And then the sister plant, Anadenanthera peregrina, in a photo by Schultes in Rio Branco, Brazil. These are the common names today. Colubrina is basically known in northwest Argentina as Seville, where it is most abundant. Most abundant, really. And Bilca in Peru and Bolivia. Peregrina was first witnessed by Columbus, and Panay is the earliest witnessed by Europeans. It was witnessed by Columbus in his first trip in 1492, and then by Panay in Columbus' second trip in 1494. So these are the earliest accounts of all. There can be anything earlier because there were no Europeans in America. So this is as early as it goes, as far as our knowledge of this use. Okay. Now the distribution of Anadenanthera is that Colubrina down here, you would say Peru, Bolivia, Argentina, and then Peregrina up in the Colombian llanos and grasslands. But then when the Taíno migrate into the Caribbean, it is so important for their predecessors that they take the plant with them and introduced it about 2,000 years ago into Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic and Haiti. But it's not a native plant, I guess, even though it's been there for now 2,000 some years. Okay. But it is an introduced plant. And then the main alkaloids in Anadenanthera, the main one is bufotenin. We have found bufotenin in plants in the Chaco that have 12% bufotenin, which is, I think, for a plant this is cultivated by the shaman that we go to over there, but it's for 12% an alkaloid in a plant it's a huge amount. It's a huge amount. We have experimented with it in all ways, snuffed it, smoked it, and extracted the bufotenin as a free base out of the seeds and using it through the nose. And it is an extraordinary experience when you do the bufotenin free base. Last time Donna timed me was an hour 50, and then the effects cease abruptly. We did 100 milligrams. It was, I would say, too much. It was a mistake. I mean, we were simply guessing. It was a terrible guess. But we thought we were dead, and obviously we were not. But I would say that if you're going to do it yourself with bufotenin free base, free base is the one that works. Maybe start with 25 milligrams and then work your way up. Maybe you like the 100. I certainly would go down to 25. Yeah. It's an extraordinary experience. I don't know. To me, it was very related with death and dying. It was impacting in that way. You think you're dead. Then, if you were to continue with the chewing of caapi in combination with yopo, it is spread all over this area of northeast Amazon. And there, this is the Orinoco River going up like that, over here to the Bay of Maracaibo. And then this Colombia, which is open grassland savannas, And over here, in this part of the Orinoco, is more like a rainforest environment. So there, many groups, the Guajibo, the Pume, and others, do chew the Banisteriopsis, wait an hour or two, and then snuff. So obviously, these people were well aware of the synergy that is occurring. They might not explain it to like we do, MAO inhibition and whatever, but they clearly knew that relationship was going on. Then the Piaroa, this is, I think, to summarize this. Robin Rodd, an Australian anthropologist, has been working with the Piaroa, quotes this quote from his informant among the Piaroa. And the guy tells him the force of Yopo and the force of Kaapi work together. And then later he says Kaapi is his spelling with just a name. Kaapi extends Yopo. See, there's an understanding on this Piaroa person. Kaapi extends Yopo and makes it stronger. Without Kaapi, Yopo only lasts a short while and the visions are weak. So there is a clear understanding by this man of what's going on here. It's not that thing. This is an excellent article, by the way. If you look it up, it's Journal of Psychoactive Drugs number 34, and it's not Synergy. And this is the typical Piaroa snuffing equipment. The bifurcated snuff, so that you put two to your nose and the other, and the white-shaped snuffers. Okay. Then other people, to change down to the brews, the Vino de Seville among the Wichí, a potent thing, like he says here. Yantes is the informant of Mario Califano. So he gets given by these supernatural beings, this Vino de Seville, and he started to shake and move about and run. And then when the entity saw that he was shaking, they gave him another glass, and he fainted. He became Welan, is what the Wichí called a supernatural ancestor. Okay. And so after that, he sat up. Supernatural helper asked him to look around the whole world and to listen everywhere. He squatted and saw everything. Afterwards, he sat on a slippery chair, looked at his body, and saw that he was not flesh, just bones. This brew, as far as I know, has never been tested by an outsider. I haven't. They keep it sort of quiet in the existence of this brew. This is your typical Anadenanthera pod and seeds. This is a small one. Generally, they tend to be a little longer. But it's typical. The easiest way to identify it is by the constriction between the seeds in the pod. Okay. Then the early chronicles. This man called Polo de Ondegardo, he writes this in 1571. Those who wish to know an event of things past or of the things that are to come, invoke the demon and inebriate himself. And for this practice in particular, make use of an herb called chicha, putting the use in chicha or drinking it by another way. Generally, when the 16th century Chronicles says either drinking in another way or tomándola por abajo, drinking it from below, they are speaking about enemas. Okay. So here it seems these people were not only drinking the chicha with the seeds, but they also consuming it as an enema. Okay. Then another early Spanish chronicle, Bernabé Cobo, says more or less the same thing. Now, so if this is going on, how come then we don't find that ayahuasca earlier? There has been much made. Plutarco Naranjo, in the conference that Eduardo mentioned before, wrote a paper in which he proposed that ayahuasca was 5,000 years old. And his argument was based on that pod. There are no chemical analysis of it or anything. It was an elaborate pod in the museum in Quito, and he decided that this was from, basically, he decided, this was for ayahuasca. So he makes a whole argument, ayahuasca is 5,000 years old, look at that pot. Then later it turned out it wasn't even 5,000 years old. It was much younger, probably about the time of Christ. But this is the problem in archaeology in trying to identify the drinking of any potion. Because how do you identify it? A pot is a pot. You know, they all roughly have a function of containing a liquid that you drink. So that it is elaborately decorated does not mean it's for ayahuasca or San Pedro or whatever. What makes it easier for us in an archaeological context with snuffing or smoking is that the paraphernalia is specific to the task. Like in this case, snuffing over there, the oldest paraphernalia found in Huaca Prieta, the north coast of Peru, 1200 BC, or these pipes made out of puma bones with Anadenanthera in them in the Puna de Jujuy in Argentina, 2100 BC. It's curious that this earliest of pipes, there's always the association of felines with psychedelics. These pipes were made with puma bone. They're about this size. And but luckily for us, they were not fully smoked. So the back end of the pipe had the smoking material without being smoked. So it allowed for the identification of the tryptamines in the mix. Okay, now, all that said, so there is an establishing that there is a clear understanding of the synergy between these plants in South America. So let's turn around and look at, is there any iconographic evidence in the Central Andes, for example, that demonstrates the idea of a predecessor of ayahuasca in ancient drinks of fermented corn or algarrobo with the addition of seeds? Well, the Moche people of the north coast of Peru, they are the most descriptive, if you want to say that, of ancient American iconography. Things are what they look like, so to speak. So this fancy pot, this is in Atlanta at Emory, it shows the Anadenanthera tree very clearly, but there are at least 50 or so, I think 57, ceramic vessels that shows people hunting deer. But these people hunting deer are dressed in very elaborate costumes. You're not going to catch any deer with a paddle and dress full of feathers and so forth. So these are probably ritual hunts, because there is no evidence whatsoever among the Moche that have been excavated extensively, any evidence that they ate deer meat. So that these are ceremonial hunts, much like the Wiriquita hunts for peyote by the Wichí, where they identify the peyote as a deer. It's interesting, this kind of connection, if you want to call it that, about this. So you find this, the trees and Anadenanthera, easy, you see the leaves, the leaves, the pods contrasted between the seed, ending in the little point. So the arch leaves, which contrast with other mimosas and acacias present in the area, like algarrobo, that are more contorted by the winds of this area. Because algarrobo, remember, algarrobo is an Arab exonym that when the Arab occupation of southern Spain back then, the carob tree becomes algarrobo, which is of the wind, caused by the wind, as the original Arab name. So this is distinguished that way because this is a more graceful tree. Okay, so there is some more of showing this, and this, significantly enough, let me back up. These are ladles to manipulate some liquid. They're about like this, more or less, with the handle, to put the hand, and then to get the liquid out of, presumably, whatever the fermentation vat is. Then other one of those. So this doesn't prove much by itself, but continuing looking at Moche iconography, you find these other ones in which here is a guy with a deer and a spear thrower in his arms, and below it in the painted scene, you have a man in a litter with that little thing hanging from his headdress. We'll go back to that in a minute. You see him down below. But then accompanying the man in the litter, there are two dogs in contorted poses. As Spruce already mentions in 1851 that the Catawichi hunters gave themselves an enema of bilka seeds and his dogs so that they could hunt better and see better in the forest. And then also the Piro, snuff yopo, the Piro hunters snuff yopo before embarking on a hunt, and also put yopo into the nose of the hunting dogs. So that this might be something dealing with that. in the deer hunt. But then in a corner there by that wall compound, you see these two, most likely women, carrying on their backs 2 ceramic jars, or 2 jars, ceramics of course, with attached Anadenanthera seeds, Anadenanthera branches, I am sorry. But then if you pursue these women in Moche iconography, you come up to, I'll show you a couple of scenes. Here you come up with this scene where the two persons are down there with 7 of those jars, and 2 of the lids of them has been substituted by deer heads. Okay, I think it's as clear as you can get in this kind of iconography that the substance contained there is connected to an Anadenanthera potion. But then if you go to another scene, you find the same in this another person with the jars there, and then you see that everybody on top is armed with spear throwers. The Moche were particularly, I don't know if violent is the right word for it, but I guess it's the best word I can find for what they did. Okay, so there you have that this man is being offered a potion, or a drink, something to drink, so that you can say with as much certainty as can be said in these things that most likely they were drinking a potion that contained the seeds of Anadenanthera. If this is so, it would say that there were ayahuasca analogs in the north coast of Peru roughly about 500 AD. So I think that the important thing to start noting here is that because when I first started this research, I was hunting for the origin of the recipe. Okay, but then I realized this is a stupidity you're doing. These plants are only available in a fairly limited environment. So what is important is the idea behind it, the concept that if you take this plant and you take this other one, there will be a synergy occurring here. And I think for these people that are doing Anadenanthera colubrina, which has bufotenine, doesn't lose oral activity when you do it by itself, unlike DMT. So that I think that if you're a user and you're exploring your environment, you would say, I have to find a way of making this more effective. So you start your exploration guided by that notion that here, if I know that if I snuff this or if I smoke it, this is quite an impacting effect. So how can I extend the effect, enhance the effect in whatever way is enhancing is for you, and then produce it that way. Another thing that you have to consider, okay, because we see this in the archaeology of San Pedro de Atacama, in northwest Argentina, where Anadenanthera is super abundant, people prefer to smoke it. For all the way on, really, from 300 on, they prefer, from 2000, 4000, they prefer to smoke. But smoke, if you look at it, is a real wasteful method. I mean, a lot is lost in the pipe, a lot of smoke is lost in the air, and the consumption in the bowl, and all of that. So if the seeds are scarce for you, you don't want to smoke. If you cross the mountains to San Pedro de Atacama from northwest Argentina, we see that the initial use of the seeds in San Pedro is by smoking, but by about the 203rd century or so, pipes disappear from the archaeological record and snuff enters in. And snuff, compared to smoking, is a much more economical way of using your material if you have to import your seeds from the other side of the Andes. It's a trek that is, in the old days, most of the road today, when we have done the journey, we had an altimeter that went to 5,000 meters and it topped off. So all along the road, it would have been it is an arduous trip today in a car, in a Jeep or whatever. Imagine with your llamas loaded with stuff, it is more. So you want to economize your seeds, so it's nothing developed. So you can always figure that among the Moche, where there is no evidence for smoking and snuffing, this was the most likely way that they were consuming this. Okay, so look at another culture more briefly, okay, because I think my time is running out. The Wari of Peru that expanded all that territory. If you're familiar with archaeology, there was the Wari and the Tiwanaku, which are here, share the same iconography and so forth, very similar in how they express themselves. So among the Wari, they're in a place called Conchopata, these large ceramic vessels that were found in the context of breweries. so that they were most likely used for containing beer, chicha. And then I'll go back to that in a second. Patricia Knobloch, an archaeologist from San Diego, California, has proposed, she found this smashed jar, just like that one, smashed into pieces, and she started seeing this icon that went all over, that was what decorated these large ceramic vessels. They're about like that. And she proposes that this is an icon of Anadenanthera, identifying these, of course, as the seed pods, this as the flowers of Anadenanthera, little pom-poms like that. And then, you know, looking myself in the snuff trace of San Pedro de Atacama, I find that if she is correct, this Anadenanthera icon is totally all over the place. Like, for example, that one of the head that's sprouting a tree, a leguminous tree, obviously, with the seeds hanging out on the side, that's from Tiwanaku in Bolivia. These are the size of the palm of your hand. They are objects that you carry with you in a bag, and you put in your hands, and you snuff, unlike the Amazon, with a single tube, not a Y-shaped one or a double one, with a single tube. The way it is depicted in the iconography is like this, so that it's good, you know, like this. So you can cover one nostril while you do it. It's kind of an efficient way of doing it. It looks like the Wari were also using these substances. And if you're wondering, well, what kind of breweries are these? Well, gigantic. This is Cerro Baúl in the south of Peru. This is, the level down here is about 2,000 meters, maybe a little higher. And then the Cerro, the Mesa, goes up about 600, 700 meters more. But on top of there is a huge brewery. And realize, of course, there's no water up there. So that all of the stuff had to be taken up. And this today, well, I'm no mountain climber, but it took Donna and me, it took us, what, 2 hours and a half to get to the top? Yeah, about 2.5. I mean, it's higher you get. So I suppose that a native person that can really move it would do it in half the time, but it took me 2.5 hours. But anyway, up there, then, there are the Wari ruins. And in the corner of the ruins, over here, there is the brewery with a fermentation room, a boiling room, the milling room, all fairly well preserved with 12 large vats in one end of the wall. So that this, in calculations made by Mosley, they figure that this had a capacity per batch of 1,800 liters of beer. So that this is one of the largest breweries. Now, chicha drinking is serious drinking. When there is a feast or a festival that will last, for example, 3 days, people drink chicha from the beginning to the end, 24 hours a day without sleeping. Serious drinking, not just let's have a drink. This is serious drinking where people really take it out. So there was evidently some kind of serious MAO inhibition. So, realize in this following statement, I'm an art historian, archaeologist, I'm no scientist, but in my research on this, in my wondering if there are beta-carbolines in the drink, yes indeed, alcohol metabolizes into beta-carbolines in your body once you drink it, but also in the brew itself. When you're making the chicha or algarrobo, the algarrobo one is more promising. When you are drinking this, algarrobo, some species of algarrobo has beta-carbolines, but all of them have tryptamine in them, not dimethyltryptamine. But the tryptamine, when is, and you the scientists here might correct me if I'm wrong, the alcohol is converted, part of it, into acetaldehyde. And the acetaldehyde, when it comes into contact with the bufotenin in the Anadenanthera seeds, some of the bufotenin, as I understand it, is converted into beta-carbolines. So effectively, if I am right, this drink would have not only the beta-carbolines that the alcohol produces when it enters your body, but also there will be beta-carbolines in the drink, producing effectively an ayahuasca analog in the thing. Now, this would have to be tested by bioassay. So our next project next year is to go down to San Pedro de Atacama, talk to one of the ladies that we know that are chicha makers, and make this, and make it like this. Of course, we do not know how many seeds we have to put, but we'll experiment about it. So this is our next step, is say, well, is this true? So if, just to summarize the movement of this, if ayahuasca is, well, and there's of course tobacco, which has Harman and Nor-Harman on it, so in the smoke. So that might be another probability there of an extra bang of beta-carbolines for the drinkers. In there, because tobacco, as you know, is constantly used. That's my tobacco with my mushroom stone. So what's the contact with the Andes, with the Amazon? We have the next question that would have to be answered. And contact with the Amazon and the Andes are ancient. You have the site of Chavin here. I'll show you what the evidence is for a minute. And then you have the site of San Agustin on the top, just to get two north and south thing that demonstrate Andean cultures that demonstrate clear connection with the Amazon. For example, the top is a stela from Chavin, known as the Tello obelisk. The main animal depicted in this tray, in this obelisk, is about like this size. Is an alligator. There are no alligators in Chavin at 13,000 feet, at 3,500 meters in altitude. So that this is clear evidence of a contact with the Amazon area. And it couldn't be any clearer. Another interesting thing here, and I don't have the time to elaborate. This is the penis of the animal. It's ejaculating, and it's ejaculating a tree that has eyes in the stems. I think, given the presence of other Brugmansia depictions within the structure, that the ejaculate of the monster is a psychedelic substance. There are many Andean myths that tell that, an Amazonian, that the different substances are the semen of the sun. So this could be likely, but that's another story. And then in San Agustin, in Colombia, an incredible site with hundreds of stone sculpture in Colombia down south, in the slopes of the Andes that go towards the Amazon. But at about, San Agustin is about 2,500 meters in altitude, more or less. There, you find a lot of this so-called alter ego imaging that are normally associated with shamanism. This is sculpture. Oh, it's taller than me. I guess it's taller as a screen like that. There are hundreds of these sculptures in San Agustin. It's worth, if you're in Colombia, don't go to this place. Don't miss it. But there, that alter ego is common in the Amazon up to the 20th century. Like this is a Cachuyana snuff container. This is now in Sweden, in Gothenburg. So that again, it shows in the north and in the south clear Andean Amazonian connections. Then you figure, well, let me jump the slides. Well, that's the area of Jesuit missions there. But as far as to account now for the distribution of ayahuasca in the Amazon, and I think it reinforces the idea that it is a recent invention. Because, I mean, people tend to get fixated. If it's old, it's better. If it's old, it's not better. I mean, what I think is good and clear here is that Amazonian pharmaceutical traditions continued well after European contact and continued up until today. So that I think that ayahuasca is recent. It's great. I mean, it just is evidence of a dynamic pharmacopoeia continuing evolving even after the interruption by our people. So I think it is vital in that respect. So take a look at this. This is a map I compiled from information by Glenn, by Brabec de Mori, by Gao, and Robin Rudd. So I think that the invention of these ayahuasca recipes that we know today took place in the Northwest Amazon, in the territory that today is Tucano territory. Probably, I would say no earlier than the late 1500s, no earlier than that. Okay, but it is the result of a bunch of visionary traditions converging in the area, because you have, of course, the Andean connection coming down, and then you have the Guahibo with their fermented drink and others, you have the Piaroa with the chewing capis, so that the thing was well known. So imagine you're in new territory, you have all this information from your surrounding cultures, you're going to go explore your environment. How do they select specific plants? Well, that is a difficult question to answer, but I think what I have been most impressed whenever I've been with any shaman is how well this person knows the environment. Like I remember with Fortunato, the shaman that we go in the Chaco, one time he took me and Donna out on a walk. And we spent, I don't know, 2-3 hours with this guy, and he knew what everything was and what it was used for. This is that, that is that, that is that. So there is an intimate knowledge of the environment. So this idea that it is a trial and error thing, that I would eat anything, like if I was a not intelligent human being, it's false. I think that there was extremely well knowledge of the environment that guided these investigations. So here, all of that seems to have coalesced in some spot in the Northwest Amazon. I should have made that circle of Tucano predecessor perhaps a little larger, but it serves to illustrate the point. So then it spread for slow, following by the movement. See, like this. Like first, there is a collapse of the Inca Empire after 1533. Atahualpa is executed. Pizarro reaches Cusco. Then there is a Spanish slavery going on over here. In this, did I blow this? Yeah, let me plug it back in. There is Spanish slavery going on in that area. Then there is Portuguese slavery over, forcing population to move this way, forcing population to move this way, encountering over here more or less. And then you get the movements, so that slavery mostly in the mouth of the Napo. Over here, there is conflict between the Spaniards and the Portuguese, so it causes more population displacement. And then after the people go and seek refuge in the Jesuit missions. And then when the Jesuit missions disband, more population movement goes around, and then when the rubber boom comes, gives it the last push, so that you get a distribution here where you have, let me go to the other map, so I have to conclude. You get that the ayahuasca probably did not reach the Shipibo, I would say about, looking at all the population displacements, maybe around 1800, more or less, a couple of hundred years ago. So that when people say, oh, ayahuasca has been used by the Shipibo for millennia, I don't think so at all. So then it continues. Among the Piro, probably they knew about it a little earlier, but by 1900 they were using it. And then the last push for the globalization of ayahuasca, if you want to consider that, is when the rubber booms, then it goes into Rio Branco, and you get the birth of like Santo Daime. And then it continues to here. So that flow like that is very elegant, really. If you look at it, it's like designed, like how it just flows and that. Well, I've been an hour and 3 minutes, so I think I should quit. So thanks to all these people that helped me enormously through this process of mine. So thanks for being such an attentive audience.